So I'm really excited for this first one-on-one discussion of the day. This will also be aired as a podcast for Food Tank's new podcast, Food Talk with Danielle Nierenberg. And this is really the part of the program where it's shameless self-promotion for Danny and for Food Tank. So you just have to bear with me, I promise, for 1 minute. The first 10 people who take their iPhones out right now, you all have them, I'm watching you on them, and you open up the app for podcasts and then find Food Talk with Danielle Nierenberg, and then subscribe, rate, and review to the podcast, and then raise your hand. We will give you a free copy of this amazing book that I worked on, Nourish Planet. Again, shameless self-promotion. We collaborated on this book with the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition Foundation. It's really meant to highlight stories of hope and success in the food system. So please, I can wait here. David and I have plenty of time. We'll just watch you until you raise your hand and rate the podcast. The podcast is very new. I'm promoting it because we want it to take off. It's free, it's without advertising, and it gives, thank you, and it gives us an opportunity, our volunteers will find you, it gives us an opportunity to talk to amazing food system leaders, thinkers and doers who are doing amazing stuff, and that includes our guest today. So it's now my incredible honor, there are plenty of people in the front here, it's my incredible honor to introduce somebody I've admired for a long time, and that's David Bronner. David, absolutely. Please clap. Hoot, hoot, whenever you can. David is the Cosmic Engagement Officer, and I love that title, of Dr Bronners, which, is a natural line of soaps that I feel needs no introduction, but he is a fifth-generation soap maker and the grandson of the original founder, Emanuel Bronner. Under David and his brother Michael's leadership, the brand has grown from $4 million in sales in 1998 to over $111 million in revenue last year. The company has led efforts on GMO labeling, fair trade, and organic standards, and a fair and living wage. And David is helping lead efforts to establish the Regenerative Organic Certified Standard. Dr. Bronners is also part of the Climate Collaborative, which leverages the natural product industry to really compel action on climate change. I am a proud member of the advisory board for the Climate Collaborative. I could keep talking about how awesome David Bronner is, how awesome Dr. Bronners is, but I really just want to dive into discussion. Is there anything you want to add to your bio that I might have missed?
No, that's...
It's all right? Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I like to do with everyone I interview is ask them this question. What's your favorite food memory? So when I think of you and how you grew up, I imagine everything tasting like soap, but I hope it wasn't that way.
No.
Do you have a favorite food memory from growing up?
Yeah, soap, brushing teeth with Bronners. We actually have toothpaste now, and we say brushing with Bronners just got a lot better. But so I guess one of the fondest food memories isn't particularly regenerative, but it is awesome, and we can make it regenerative. We're going to make this regenerative in the future. Is I would cut weightlifting class senior year in spring semester. It didn't matter. And my last class, and come home and take a half pint of vanilla ice cream and a big fruit cocktail can. And I put them in a big Tupperware. And then there was this Chinese brush painter who was just put me into a trance. He was just so awesome on PBS. And I would just eat my ice cream and fruit cocktail and just go
totally
into this complete
out.
trance watching
That's the best one I've heard so far. I ask everyone this question. That's not what I expected from you. It was amazing. A round of applause for that. So since I was working on questions for you, I'm terrified that I'll call you Dr. Bronner, so that might happen during this. So I'm sorry, David.
The soap works. I'm 100 years old.
So I want to get into the history of the company. And your grandfather came here as an immigrant and really started the company from nothing. And given all that's happening in the world today, and especially in the States with, these questions about immigration. Why is it important for you and your brother to continue this legacy of the company?
Yeah, well, my granddad founded our company as a nonprofit religious organization. He had the ovens of the Holocaust behind him that killed his parents, and he felt in a nuclear-armed world that the next Holocaust, we're going to all perish if we don't realize our transcendent unity across religious and ethnic divides. And so he was a consultant to the U.S. soap industry. One thing led to another in the post-war era of kind of better living through chemistry and the kind of Red Scare and all that hysteria. So he launched his own line of products of natural soaps based on he himself was a third-generation master soap maker trained in the German guild system of the time. And so this was in an era of like kind of personal care, agriculture, everything going to petrochemicals.
Sure.
And so he launched his natural soaps and then kind of going against the tide of the time, but had an early kind of vision of the problem of where industry was going. And so his soaps, were mostly a vehicle really for his label, which was a call to action and unity and a message of peace. And really caught on with the counterculture, who really embraced both the message of peace and a very, versatile biodegradable soap that you could wash your hair, the dishes, the dog by that side of the river and not worry about it.
Absolutely.
And so as far as fast forward to now, and then our dad, me and my brothers, Mike, are now running a company, but our father and mother and Uncle Ralph, so our father Jim, mother Trudy, they're, especially my dad, really is our central moral inspiration. Like my granddad had the cosmic vision, whereas my dad was all about how do you take care of your family and the immediate community in front of you? Like what are the practical ways you can unite Spaceship Earth? So he really set the example shortly before he died 20 years ago, because my granddad went off to save the world, and my dad basically came up in a lot of foster homes and had some really important mentors, youth mentors, obviously intersect them and really help him become the moral giant that he became. And he oversaw the transfer of 1,000 acres of land in East County to the Boys and Girls Club, which at the time was worth a third of our entire value. And we were facing huge estate taxes, and everyone was telling me, don't do this. And he was like, no, we can do it, we can afford it, and this is what we're about.
Sure.
And so he set that example, basically for me and my brother, and that, that our company and our granddad too. He leveraged everything, all his profits into his mission, and that, all that this engine or this company is an engine for progressive change. All profits we generate in excess of what we need to build the business, we're going to dedicate to the causes and the charities we believe in. So we cap all our executive compensation at 5-to-1, and no matter how big we get, we're going to donate all excess profits into these causes. And that last year was $8 million.
It's amazing.
And regenerative organic agriculture being a primary.
Sure, and I do want to get into that, but first, I want to ask you, as part of a family-owned company, did you feel a lot of pressure to be involved? Is there something else you wanted to do that you didn't get to do? Or was this,
Yeah,
was it
interesting. Well, it's all coming full circle now.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I didn't feel that much pressure. And I did know after college that the one thing I wasn't going to do was work for my dad. Because
how'd that work out for you?
Well, eventually, because he had founded his own, he actually developed firefighting foam for Monsanto's firefighting division.
Oh, so interesting.
Yeah, and I grew up selling firefighters and using firefighting foam, which is now standard in structure and forest fires. And Monsanto was obviously was then a much more diversified business. Still a highly problematic company, but like a country, had some good things, but mostly bad, and now it's all bad. Anyways, so but that's kind of an interesting poetic thing because we became leaders in the anti-GMO movement. Where was I going with all that?
The pressure to be part of a family company.
So so I grew up, and then my dad developed the foam as a special effects foam for Hollywood. Me and my brother grew up blasting foam on trees and Alka-Seltzer commercials, 100-degree summer weather, and all the extras are in parkas. So after college, I was in Amsterdam, and I had a Europass, and intersected the 8th annual High Times Cannabis Cup, and was exposed to industrial hemp for the first time, and was in my squad. I was in this amazing squad, and I had members of a church called Our Church, that was like a church in Arkansas of all places in '93, that was using cannabis as a sacrament, as a First Amendment protest to the government. And of course, the feds busted it up, and 3 of these members were in the squad. And really, I was going through some huge psychedelic openings and mediated openings, and blasting into the spirit world of that somehow in the midst of this absurd and often tragic human situation, that there is a deep light and love, and
Sure.
And that my granddad was totally on it. He's totally right. But the way I translated that was it was like, okay, the drug war is a religious war on the sacrament of my people, and I wanted to like basically grow plants and take that route. But that didn't quite work out, and then I became a mental health counselor in Boston, and became vegan, adopted a vegan diet in this time, but then really just appreciated what my granddad was all about, and the opportunity I had to do that. But I guess a cannabis entrepreneur was what I would have been. And
But you are. I mean, can you talk about, the company has been very vocal about industrial cannabis production. Can you talk about why that's part of the philosophy now?
Yeah, and in fact, in this full circle, I'm going to be launching Brother David's cannabis flower line, working with
Nice.
Canna. So taking the regenerative organic is like, who's the company like us that's like partnering with, coconut oil farmers and palm farmers and olive farmers and mint farmers, like that supply our raw materials, like most companies. They have agricultural supply chains, and these are commodities that usually companies buy from brokers on price and spec. They don't have any visibility or transparency or interest in knowing how they're produced, how they're grown.
Right, they just want it for the lowest price.
Yeah, and that just ends up to be a race to the bottom. The land's being destroyed, communities are being ripped apart. It's just, it's horrible. So, we were inspired back in the day by Guayaki, the yerba mate company that really took responsibility for where their yerba mate is coming from, basically preserve the rainforest and the Guayaki tribe and their livelihoods via a business model that connects with ethical consumers who wants to support products that don't go to hell and back, and instead are regenerating the earth and are part of the solution.
Sure.
So we were inspired then to first, basically, well, who's doing regenerative, fair trade, organic, coconut, palm, olive, and mint oils? The only one in the world at that point was Canaan Fair Trade in the West Bank of Palestine, working with thousands of small olive farmers who were facing really difficult to getting even the local markets and Nablus and stuff, let alone out of the country. But to be clear, we weren't being anti-Israel about it, even though we just hate the occupation. We also sourced from a Jewish family farm on the Israeli side, and then an Arab Christian project.
So really bringing both sides together,
yeah. And they're totally regenerative, they're awesome. And then for coconut oil, we had a tsunami relief project in Sri Lanka. One thing led to another. We're partnered with.
And you just returned from there
yesterday,
so I'm right? Can you?
A little rambling and jet lagged here.
No, you're not rambling. But I think it's important for people to understand that you go and visit these producers and really talk with them. Can you talk about that kind of experience? Why it's important for you personally to be there to understand the challenges they face, but also how to work with them in a collaborative way?
Yeah. Well, we want to make sure that that everyone who's involved with the production of our raw materials through the end manufacturer, that those livelihoods are being respected, that labor is not being exploited.
What typically happens when companies go into regions and work with these
let's
producers?
talk about palm oil. So I was just in Ghana, and the suit actually comes from Alawanjo, who's the founder of Alafia Body Care. It's a shea butter body care company working with.
It's an amazing suit.
Yeah, and it's tailored.
Round of applause for this suit.
Thank you. Yeah. So we're supplying him palm kernel nuts from our fair trade palm farmers who are now adopting dynamic agroforestry methods to. So basically, regenerative organic agriculture is the solution to industrial. So industrial ag, especially in terms of like tree crops and palm oil, is, if you're not like really being conscious about where you're buying palm oil, it's like obviously one of the worst crops in the world, and it's these monoculture plantations are being put into, they're ripping up wetlands and virgin rainforest and orangutan habitat, and just huge amounts of soil carbon is being oxidized into the air. Communities are being disrupted. Farmers and complex tribal societies are just being ripped apart and made into like slave wages, plantation workers. So keeping, partnering with farmers who do regenerative organic management, which is a more intensive, knowledge-intensive management style. That
if you can, I mean, not everyone who's listening understands what the regenerative organic model really means. So if you can just, give a 30-second sort of.
So regenerative organic, it's basically bringing together the best of the soil health, fair labor, and animal welfare movements in a way that basically is about like a more intensive knowledge-based management of your land to replicate a natural ecosystem. So if you look at a natural ecosystem, there is no chemical inputs. Like there's a balance of animal and plant life. It's self-regenerating. So it's basically farming in nature's image. And it's with tree crops like palm, like the big regenerative organic wave is to intercrop with, if you look at a wild ecosystem, you'll have tall trees, mid-level trees, bushes, and ground cover. So how do you intercrop in a way that kind of replicates that? And so we have palm trees and banana trees and cocoa and cassava. And when you do it right and you do this in the correct way, you are basically doubling the yields than if you had like those 4 crops in a monoculture block. If you dynamically interplant them correctly, you'll double the yield. You'll minimize pest and weed pressure, and double incomes. And
so how does the company work directly with these farmers? Are you helping with training? Are you helping with? Yeah,
so we have a team that is like, we've brought together like an incredible all-star team that from kind of primarily soil health, but also the fair labor side of the equation, that works with, and we're constantly learning. We're learning all the time.
And you're learning from them as well.
Exactly. It's a totally dynamic process back and forth.
Collaboration is key, yeah.
But we bring in like some of the top, like this guy, I forget his last name, Joachim, he's a German cat who has been working with dynamic ag forestry in Central America for a while. He's now like, there's just a huge wave, and we've just got religion about it, so we're part of like the next wave of kind of popularizing dynamic ag forestry to replace these plantations. Just to answer the question on cannabis before I totally forget. So FloCanna is the entity like Bronners in the Emerald Triangle that's partnering with all these small-scale cannabis farmers who are facing a catastrophe with legalization that rewards kind of huge corporate indoor grows, energy intensive, totally chemical intensive. We need to basically be sourcing medicine from a regenerative, having that same consciousness. FloCanna is the entity. They're doing great. They're in stores now, but we're pushing a certification alongside regenerative organic, which we're developing in partnership with Rodale and Demeter and Patagonia and just other rockstar orgs. But because cannabis is federally legal, you can't call it organic. So the parallel certification is called Sun and Earth certified. That'll be in the cannabis space. That's being developed and launched here this next year.
I just want to ask a question about labeling and certification. I feel like, unless you live in California, I think consumers are still confused about what organic really means. Do you have any concerns about adding these other sort of certification practices or labeling practices? Will that further confuse consumers, or because they're for different things that they won't? I mean, I know, thinking about, my family, they get confused when they hear all these different labels or see them at the store.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a problem, but we believe between ourselves and Patagonia, and now we're in the pilot phase now of the regenerative organic, and we have like a roster of rockstar farms and brands involved, that we're going to be coming out of the gate, and very soon customers are going to be like, well, wait a minute, organic's not enough. We need to make sure the workers and farmers are being paid correct, and that the animals are being, it's high level pasture-based livestock criteria. So, I mean, we feel like, and I should maybe, just talk about that. We really feel that this is the kind of farming producer side of what we need to see as a consumer revolution, and we support Kiss the Ground and the new documentary project with the same name that's going to be coming out.
Absolutely.
And
so
really
exciting, yeah.
Yeah, I'm educating everyone that like that their plate's a farm, and their fork's a pitchfork, their knife is a butchering, is a butchering tool. What does their farm look like in the world? Is it regenerating the world? Is it treating was that animal whose life you've taken? Was it respected?
Sure.
Live a life with living, and were the farmers respected or not? Or is it a disaster? Because if you are unconscious about it, it's just you're defaulting to the machine.
Sure, but most companies aren't thinking this way. And granted, you're a very enlightened company, but if you, for example, sold to a company like Unilever, don't you think you would reach more consumers and have more of an impact? Or is it so important to you to keep it within the family that's never a question for you?
Yeah, it's pretty much never a question, because we see.
I thought so, but I had to ask.
Yeah. So we support for sure progressive companies who, I mean, there is the argument that you just made that a really ethical company can influence a much larger ecosystem, and these kind of CPGs, these like multinational massive companies like General Mills or Kraft, and as they like buy these different independent, mission-driven companies, that can influence that larger entity, but there's an inevitable dilution of that original mission.
Absolutely.
So we feel that we're going to be much more impactful staying independent, but we understand as well, like seeing and we can see it. We can see like General Mills starting to think about soil and
Yeah, which is exciting.
Yeah.
I think they're learning from the smaller companies and the medium-sized companies.
Yeah, and they bought Annie's, I believe,
yeah,
right? And Annie's
who's really into regen. So yeah.
So absolutely, we need to see the big companies embrace and get religion about it. But they're often greenwash. I mean, I would not.
Absolutely.
There's that tendency to kind of say, okay, well, this is our regenerative brand, and we'll just kind of have that greenwash, but not necessarily commit their whole brand portfolio to that.
But I think that's why the work with the Climate Collaborative is so important, because it really puts the companies and the people who are doing good work out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good project, and we're getting a lot of buy-in. And I think, I think as consumers get educated, I mean, ultimately, companies are going to do what consumers want.
Yeah.
And and I think there's a lot of pressure, right? The weed killer. I mean, I was just in a dentist watching the news. I never really watched TV, and I was like, wow, dude, man, Quaker Oats, there's all these exposés of glyphosate and Quaker Oats.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dang, man, it's amazing to see. So.
Yeah. One question, but I want to open it up to the audience in a minute here or so, but I'm very curious, and this is kind of a personal question. It goes back to the sort of the family-based business. You work with your brother very closely, and I like my sister very much, but I wouldn't want to work with her.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, Jenny. I wonder how that works. How is it to be working with family on sort of a constant level, and something you really believe in? But do you ever have sibling rivalry?
Yeah, no, we've done amazing work over the years. We used to blow out, once a week. I would say we blow out once every 6 months at this point.
I love it.
And then when we do, we kind of understand what our dynamics are, and I'm not that activist with my head in the clouds who's going to run the family enterprise into the ground, and he's not the soulless businessman. It's all right, what are we actually arguing about? It's just isolate and be constructive and
absolutely, absolutely.
So,
that's great.
Yeah, we're
awesome.
Way better.
Awesome. I know there are probably a lot of questions for David.
No.
There's one right over here.
Thanks for coming. I'm loving this. So I have a question. So you're very globally focused, having different suppliers from all over the world. Is there anything that you're doing to tighten that circle up a little bit? Are you supporting more local producers, or is that just not possible for your business?
Well, so I mean, most of our oils are tropical oil. So just to make proper Castile soap, it needs to be a high lauric, which is pretty much coconut and palm kernel are the real lauric oils. And then olive oil, I guess we could be sourcing domestically, but we kind of really like the all-one Palestinian Israeli deal. Mint, that, that's an interesting history. I mean, back in the day, we were trying real hard to find organic American mint, but no one at the time, this is like 2003, there was so much resistance. So we ended up partnering in Uttar Pradesh with Indian mint farmers who were kind of organic by default, organic by neglect. It's not, I mean, that's an important point, is that there's kind of organic by default, which means like you're not doing anything really to, you can have really unhealthy farms. And then regenerative organic when you're actually really farming correctly and really building your soil health and life and stuff. But anyways, that was the history. But domestically we do, well, cannabis, so that's like a big in hemp. So we're absolutely going to be, putting a lot of energy and resources in we feel like there's a raw opportunity here because this is a plant that's supposed to be about consciousness to really, elevate here with support those family farms who are farming cannabis responsibly, oftentimes in a permaculture way, with other crops and then kiss the ground and these huge commodities. I mean, American farmland, a lot of it is really these huge commodity grains for livestock. How do we convert that? How do we get the animals out of their cages, out of these factory farms, lower the population, get them integrated into a cropping system, pasture system, like Gabe Brown and Kiss the Ground so eloquently shows, is that if you can get get rotational grazing and build soil fertility and then go in with your crops.
Sequester carbon, you're going to solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, instead of your manure lagoons being this huge problem, the fertility is integrated and in the cropping system. You're minimizing soil disturbance, you're covering soil, it's doing all the right things.
Absolutely.
And so, like, I guess supporting groups like Kiss the Ground and farmers like Gabe and Ray.
And there are other organizations who are doing great stuff, the Rodale Institute and others.
Oh yeah, really, Rodale and Demeter. And actually, I mean, we did, so Will Harris, so White Oak Pastures, so we would love to see him do what Gabe's doing. So we actually have been kind of like, hey, if we've been actively looking for land that he could basically rotate his cattle onto to do what Gabe's doing, which is basically Gabe is a totally closed system. He grows all his own grain for his livestock right on his farm. So yeah, we would.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a fantastic system. We have time for one more question. I'm so sorry that I ran long. It was my fault. Can we go to the other side of the room? I'm so sorry, but I want to make sure we spread out.
I'm being set up.
No, not at all. We're right up here.
No.
Up here. Sorry.
Hi. I was curious, and I have a friend that's in the industry, in the cannabis industry, business side, went to college. Wanting to know, are you hiring?
Actually, we're going to be pretty much just partnering with Flow Canna. They're going to be handling a lot of pretty much all the production and fulfillment and sales functions. We might have some brand ambassadors. But pretty much it's just we're almost just having a licensing agreement and then all the funds, it's like a nonprofit, all the funds are just going to go through certification and education of cannabis farmers and promotion of the Sun & Earth certified.
That sounds amazing.
Great.
Love your mission.
Right on, man.
David, I want to give you 30 seconds to give some final thoughts to the audience. So what would you like them to do, today, besides buy your soap? What should folks in this audience be doing?
So I guess I coined a term I'm actually interviewed in Kiss the Ground, talking about the regenerative diet, and that, I'm personally vegan and will be till the day I die, but I've kind of, through visiting a lot of farms, I've come to really respect high animal welfare, pasture-based systems, but that, people need to be really disciplined about what they're eating, especially when it comes to meat and animal products, that if it's not like grass-fed or, like don't buy it, and just really understand like the impact, because livestock especially multiply the impact of all the GMO, chemical intensive grains, soy and corn. That's, magnified that plant energy and protein. There's a drop out. It takes like 10 times that amount to make an equivalent amount of animal product. So if you're not buying the right kind of meat and milk and eggs, you're like multiplying, you're multiplying that disaster. Conversely, if you're doing it right, you're multiplying like the correct.
The benefits, yeah, absolutely.
So the regenerative diet, and it's also about, whether you're vegan, vegetarian, or omnivore, like to like less and better meat, like just sourcing from.
Reduce, refine, yeah.
Go to Cafe Gratitude.
Ryland's getting all the love today.
We really believe in, he's kind of got me really onto the soil health revolution.
And we'll hear from him later as well. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a great point to end on. Can we give David a round of applause, please?
Thank you.